every year as I prepare the homily for this Sunday of the baptism of Jesus, I hear from colleagues and I read commentators who debate whether the sermon should teach about baptism or preach the gospel text, this year from St. Matthew. The majority opinion is to preach the latter, but I have opted for the former. Why? Because I worry that many, even the most faithful Christians, have little idea what baptism is, why we do it, or why it should be why it should have a major significance in our lives. Why, for example, do Episcopalians baptize infants rather than wait until adulthood? Maybe the choice of teaching about baptism or preaching the text doesn't have to be a choice. Maybe I should teach about baptism by preaching today's gospel account you just heard. Two elements of Matthew's narrative stand out for me. First, as I said with our young people earlier, baptism is about identity. The booming voice from heaven says of Jesus, "This is my Son, the beloved, with whom I am well pleased." Good news. God spoke the same promise over each of us when we were baptized. Our baptism informs who we are, the beloved children of God, and confers upon us God's unconditional love. Baptism reminds us who we are in relationship always to whose we are, God's precious sons and precious daughters. Or have you wondered why Jesus, whom we affirm was without sin and so in no need of forgiveness, submitted to John the Baptist's baptism for forgiveness? Because Jesus' baptism was not about forgiveness, but beginning his public ministry. His baptism became the inauguration, the commissioning of Jesus and his redemptive work on earth. The occasion to make his identity as Son of God and Messiah promised crystal clear. Secondly, we believe and teach that first and foremost, above all else, holy baptism is God's work. Our patron saint, John the Baptist, might have been the one who plunged Jesus into the water of the River Jordan. But it was the Holy Spirit at work that day. St. Matthew testifies, "Suddenly the heavens were opened, and the Spirit of God descending like a dove and alighting on him." And not the voice of John the Baptist, but the very voice of God speaking from heaven, this is my Son, the beloved, with whom I am well pleased. And this is the same Spirit who baptizes us. So baptism is wholly God's act. Oh sure, next time we have a baptism back there, I will say the words and I will pour the water, and if it's an infant, the parents will bring the child and hold the child in their arms. But let us make no mistake, God will be acting. God will be doing baptism. God will be doing adoption. God will be making that child God's son or daughter. And that is why we baptize infants. a baby who has absolutely no understanding of what's happening. I absolutely love it, that unconditional grace, because holy baptism is God's act of grace. No strings attached grace, holy God's work, God's gift. So why wait for God's adoption until adulthood? Although it's never too late this side of death to receive so sacred and supreme a gift as baptism. Our relationship to God, guaranteed by our baptism, is the one relationship we can't screw up. Precisely because we did nothing to establish it. To God alone be the grace and the glory. We can neglect the relationship. We can deny it, run away from it, ignore it, and yet always return to it. Why? Because God, in God's pure love, loves us so deeply and so completely that God won't refuse our homecoming. God, like the loving Father in that wonderful parable of the prodigal son, is always on the lookout, always ready to welcome us home to our baptism, to that relationship that began in baptism. To welcome us home whenever we return to God, our Father, as a repentant son or daughter. We are God's beloved by virtue of our baptism, not because of what we have done or because of anything we can do to earn it, but solely because God's very nature, propensity, and desire is to love us. So how might we daily live out this precious gift of God that is our baptism? I have a suggestion. Why not, when we drink a glass of water or wash the dishes or our hands, when we shower or luxuriate in the bathtub, or when we get drenched by the rain because we've forgotten our umbrella, or when we take a swim, make it a moment to remember that we are the baptized of God. And to remember the incredible promises God made to us in that once-in-a-lifetime but never-ending moment. Whenever we are in touch with water, make it our mantra to say aloud or in our heart, I am God's beloved child, accepted by God as God's very own, and then sent, inaugurated, commissioned to make the world more godlike. Now I have an offer for you. Most likely, the day of your baptism, you or your parents were given a baptismal candle. It was probably embossed in color with a dove or a shell and droplets of water, and perhaps had ciphers of Christ. Perhaps it's in a keepsake box, or in the junk drawer, or long ago lost. At every baptism here, I send home one of those candles and express my hope that every anniversary of the baptism, that candle will be lit as a reminder and a celebration of God's adoption. God naming us one of his beloved. So here's my offer. No cost to you or to the church. If you were never given a candle or can't find yours, no worries, let me know. After Mass, write down your name on the paper that will be on the table in the parish hall, and I will gift you with a brand new baptismal candle. But promise me, after researching the date of your baptism, that you will light that candle on your baptismal anniversary for a few moments each year. Why? Because the anniversary of our baptism, when God adopted us as God's very own, is a far greater and more significant day, deserving more lavish attention and celebration and thanksgiving than our birthday. Our birth begins our earthly life. Our baptism begins our heavenly life. So maybe we should ask each of you for the date of your baptism and begin listing that date in the bulletin rather than your birthday. Also, maybe lighting the candle anytime you need to be reminded of God's profound, enduring, yes, eternal and unconditional love for you. Those times when the challenges and the burdens of life seem overwhelming, when you need to hear the assurance of God, light the candle and be reminded of God's promise. Do not fear, for I have redeemed you. I have called you by name. You are mine. So please let me gift you with a baptismal candle, and please sign up later. Now, it is our delight again to come to the table of God's beloved Son, and at the table to see and touch in wafer and wine, to hear and to consume Christ's very own body and blood, proof positive just how incredibly far God goes to show us we are ever loved and forgiven. This is my body for you. This is my blood for you. For you are my child, my daughter, my son, my beloved, my chosen, in whom I take delight. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.